The hour between the owls, sit closer, friend. The fire has more in it than it looks. Hold your hands out there. The wind in this wood is a clean wind tonight, not a wet one, and we will sleep well enough when the story is told. Pour your cup full. I have a kettle of small beer on the stones, and you may have what you can drink of it. We have time. We have all night. I am going to tell you tonight a thing that happened to me when I was very young, younger than I have ever told most people about. I was 17 years old when this happened, and I had been on the road with Old Cuthbert for only 9 months, and the old bard was teaching me the country the way a country teaches itself, by walking through it. We were in our second autumn together. The first autumn I had been too new for him to take far. He had kept me near a town in Cumberland where his sister lived, and he had drilled me in fingerings and in letters and in the names of every lord in the north, and I had learned to keep my mouth shut at a hall, which was the lesson, he said, was harder than any of the others. By the second autumn he had decided I could walk a real road, and we were walking one. You should know, friend, what I was like at 17, because the story depends on it. I was not a brave boy. I had not had the sort of life that makes a boy brave. I had been raised by my mother in a small town further south, and my mother had been a quiet woman who took in mending, and my father had been a soldier who did not come back from a war when I was 9, and I had grown up small for my age and bookish for my station. And when my mother died of a cough in my 15th year, I had been put with an uncle who was a tanner and who did not like me, and I had run away from him after a year, and Cuthbert had found me at a crossroads in Cumberland, eating a hedge apple and looking near dead, and he had taken me on for reasons I did not understand then and do not entirely understand now. I think he was lonely. I think his wife had been dead 12 years by then, and his only daughter was married into a hall down south and did not write often, and he wanted a boy beside him on the road, and I was the boy he found. I was lucky in him. I have never been so lucky in anyone else. We were going east. There had been a hire at a manor in the Eden Valley that we had taken in late September, and there was a second hire promised at a hall called Aldric near the coast for the first week of November. Between the two was a stretch of country we had to cross, and Cuthbert had a way of crossing it that he had used 3 times before. He was a man, friend, who did not like to repeat a road if he could help it. He said a bard who walked the same lane twice in the same year was a bard who had run out of country, and a bard who had run out of country had run out of stories, and a bard who had run out of stories was a man who should set down the harp and take up some other trade. Cuthbert had no other trade. He never had to. He always found a new way to go. The new way that autumn was through a forest called Holt Murrow. It is a forest you will not find easily on the maps the lords keep. It is a forest the lords do not own. It is on the high ground between the Eden Valley and the head of the Tees, and it is owned in some old sense by no one, or by the country itself, which is a thing you and I both know means it is owned by the people who live in it and around it, and have lived there since before any earl wrote his name on a deed. It is a hard forest. The trees are old. The paths in it are the paths of charcoal burners and of men who keep pigs in summer, and a man who does not know the paths can be turned about by Holt Murrow inside of half a day and come out 2 valleys from where he meant to come out if he comes out at all. Let me pause a moment, friend. Are you settled? Is the blanket close? I want to tell this one properly, and I want you with me. The fire is good. Drink your beer. I will go on. Cuthbert had walked Holt Murrow once before, 15 years before he took me through it, and he remembered the way well enough. He said we would take 3 days to cross it. We had bread and cheese in our packs, and a small flask of strong drink for the cold nights, and our cloaks and our harps, and that was what we had. We carried no weapons. A bard does not carry a weapon. A bard's protection in those days was that he was a bard, and the country knew it, and the country let him pass. We went into Holt Murrow on a clear, cold afternoon in the second week of October. The leaves were down already, most of them, and the wood was open in the way an autumn wood is open. with brown bracken underfoot, and the trunks of the old beech and oak standing dark and bare against a sky that had begun to grey over by the time we had walked an hour. There was no path that I could see. Cuthbert walked east-northeast by feel, and I followed, and once an hour he would stop and look about him at the trunks and the slope of the ground and the way the light fell, and he would adjust his line a little, and we would go on. He did not speak much in the wood. He was not a talkative man on a hard road. He saved his talk for halls and fires. The first night we slept under a great fallen beech, on a bed of bracken that Cuthbert showed me how to gather, and we made a small fire that Cuthbert built and showed me how to build, and we ate our bread and cheese, and drank a swallow each of the strong drink and slept hard. The wood at night was not what I had thought a wood at night would be. It was not silent. It had its own sounds. There were owls, friend, calling from very far apart, and the small movements of beasts in the undergrowth, and the wind in the high tops of the trees that was not the wind on the ground. The wind in the tops sounded like a thing arguing with itself a long way off. I lay awake for an hour or so listening to it, and then I slept. The second day we went deeper. The trees grew bigger as we went. I have been in many woods since, friend, and I have not been in a wood like Holt Murrow. The oaks in its centre are not the oaks you know. They are the oaks before the oaks you know. They are great twisted things with trunks 10 and 12 feet through, and their crowns are bare and broken and grown into strange shapes from 100 winters of storms. And at their roots the ground is a mound of leaf mould a foot deep where nothing else grows. We passed one such tree at midday, and Cuthbert stopped and laid his hand on it and stood for a moment with his head bowed, and I thought he was praying, though Cuthbert was not a praying man. And when he turned to me he said, "This one is older than the kings, lad, older than any king whose name you have learned. Take your hat off." I took my hat off. We stood there a moment together. Then we went on. It was the afternoon of that second day that the path we had been following, such as it was, came down a slope into a clearing, and we stopped, because in the clearing was a cottage. It was not a charcoal burner's hut. It was a proper cottage. A stone cottage of one story with a roof of turf, and a small garden in front of it walled in piled stones, and a goat tethered at the side of the garden, and smoke rising thin from a hole in the roof. There was no path to the cottage from any direction I could see, except the one we had come down on. The clearing was perhaps 30 paces across, and the cottage stood square in the middle of it, and the wood pressed close around the clearing on every side. Cuthbert lifted a hand to stop me before I went down. We stood under the trees at the edge of the clearing, and we looked at the cottage. He said quietly, without looking at me, "We will ask for shelter for the night. We will offer to play for our supper. We will speak respectfully. We will not ask many questions. Do you hear me, lad?" I said I did. He said, "Whoever lives in this cottage, lad, has lived here a long time, and the wood has let them. Mind your tongue." We walked down into the clearing. The goat watched us. As we came up to the garden wall, the door of the cottage opened, and a woman stood in it. She was perhaps 40. She was not old, and she was not young. She had dark hair tied back at her neck, and a face that had been brown from the sun once and had paled with the autumn, and she wore a wool dress the colour of bracken and a clean white apron over the dress, and her feet were bare on the flagstones of her doorway. She said, before either of us spoke, "You are bards." Cuthbert said, "We are. I am Cuthbert of the North Road. This is my apprentice. We are crossing Holt Murrow to a hire at Aldric, and we ask for shelter for one night, and we will play for our supper if you have a hearth for us." She looked at us a moment. Her eyes were grey, friend. I have not forgotten those eyes. They were grey like the wood at dusk, and they did not blink as much as eyes ought to. She said, "You may have shelter. You may have supper. You will not need to play. There is one thing I will ask of you in return, and it is not the playing of harps. Will you hear it before you come in?" Cuthbert said, "We will hear it." She said, "You will sleep tonight in the loft above this room. You will sleep through the night. From the time the first owl calls to the time the second owl answers, you will not come down from the loft. Not for any reason. Not if you hear a knock at the door. Not if you hear me speak below. Not if you hear someone you know speak below. You will stay in the loft, and you will keep your eyes shut if you can. You will not come down until the second owl. Do you hear me, Master Bard? Cuthbert said, I hear you. She said, and you, lad? I said, I hear you. She said, good, then come in. The supper is on the fire. Let me stop a moment, traveler. Are you warm? Pull your blanket. The fire is good. I want you to hear this next part properly. I am telling it the way she said it to us. Drink your cup. I will go on. We went in. The cottage was one room on the ground floor, with a hearth on the back wall, and a deal table in the middle and 2 stools by the table, and a settle by the hearth, and a kist along the side wall, and a ladder going up to the loft she had spoken of. The loft was open to the room below, a sleeping platform of boards laid across the rafters, with 2 straw mattresses on it, and a single woolen blanket folded on each. The smell of the cottage was the smell of any good country cottage. Wood smoke, baking, the dry sweetness of herbs hung in bunches from the rafters. There was nothing in the room I had not seen in 20 cottages before it. I looked at the herbs as we sat down. I had begun, that year, to learn the names of the herbs from Cuthbert, who knew them all, and I tried to name the bunches above my head. There was sage, which I knew by the smell. There was tansy, which I knew by the leaf. There was rosemary, and a thing that might have been wormwood, and a thing I did not know at all, that hung in a small tight bundle by itself away from the others, in a corner of the rafters where the smoke did not reach. The thing I did not know had small dark berries on its stem and grey-green leaves, and it was not a herb I have ever seen since, in any cottage or any hall, and I have wondered about it now and again over the years. I have wondered if it was the herb that kept the cottage safe. I cannot say. I did not ask. I was minding my tongue. She gave us water to wash our hands in a basin by the door. She gave us a stew of mutton and barley and root vegetables and bread and a cup each of small beer. She sat with us at the table while we ate. She ate herself, a small portion. She did not give her name. Cuthbert did not ask. I did not ask either. I had been told to mind my tongue, and I was minding it. The stew was the best stew I have had in my life, friend. I will tell you that, and you may believe me or not. It was a country stew of country meat and country roots, and there was nothing in it I could not have named. And yet it tasted, eating it, like a thing made by a person who had cooked the same stew every week for 30 years, and had grown into it the way a man grows into a coat he has worn long. The bread was the same way. I asked, after I had eaten 1 slice, if I might have another, and she gave me another, and Cuthbert watched me eat the 2nd slice and did not say anything, but I knew from the way his eyes were that he was glad I was eating. He had been worried about me. I had been thin in the cheek that autumn after a hard summer, and Cuthbert had been trying to feed me up between the hires, and he was glad of a good supper for me in a strange cottage. When we had eaten, she cleared the table, and she said, "It is 2 hours yet until the first owl. You will sit by the fire, and you will rest, and you will warm yourselves. There is a book on the kist if the Master Bard would like it. I will spin in this chair. We will not speak much, for I will be listening, and I would have you listening too." Cuthbert took the book. I saw him glance at the spine before he sat down with it, and his face did not change, but he looked at it a moment longer than he might have. I learned, when we were on the road again, that the book had been a book in a language he did not know, which was unusual, because Cuthbert had learned 3 languages besides English over a long life on the road. He could not say what language it was. He could say only that the letters in it were not letters he had seen in any other book, and that the woman, when she had handed it to him, had done so without comment, as if it were a perfectly ordinary book to find on a kist, in a cottage, in a wood. He had read it the way one reads a thing one cannot read, looking at the shape of the words and the layout on the page, and he had set it down after a while and had said nothing. He sat on the settle, and he opened the book by the light of a tallow candle she set beside him. I sat on a stool by the hearth, and I watched her spin. She had a small wheel by her chair, and she worked a thread of grey wool, and the wheel turned and made a low sound that was almost the sound of a cat purring. And now and again she stopped and listened, with her head cocked a little to the side, and then she went on. I did not know what she was listening for. I did not ask. The wood beyond the small window was dark. The candle burned. The fire made its sounds. We sat there for what felt to me like a long time, but was, I think, only 2 hours. I will tell you what I thought about in those 2 hours, friend, because that, too, is part of the story. I thought about my mother. I had not thought about her for some weeks, the road being what it was, and the work being what it was, and a young man's mind being the chattering thing it is. But sitting by the fire in that cottage, with the woman spinning her grey thread, I thought about my mother. I thought about her sitting in our small kitchen in the south, the year before she died, with her own basket of mending in her lap, and her own quiet face by her own small fire, and the way she had been towards the end of her life, when she had grown thin and was always cold, and had taken to wrapping a shawl about her shoulders even on summer evenings. I thought of her hands. My mother had had good hands, friend. Long fingers, careful with a needle, gentle when she touched my hair. I had loved her hands. I had not thought of her hands for a year. Sitting by that fire I thought of them, and I cried a little quietly, where Cuthbert and the woman did not see, and I think now that the cottage had something in it that brought the mothers up in young men. I do not know if the woman had done it on purpose. I do not know if she was glad of it. I think she was. I think she liked, that night, to have a boy beside her fire who was thinking of his mother, because that, too, was a thing she was guarding against. Then, from outside the cottage, somewhere not very far off, an owl called. A single long hoot, the kind a barn owl makes when it is calling its mate, or saying it has caught a thing, or saying any of the things owls say. The woman stopped the wheel. She set her hands in her lap. She said, "That is the first owl. Go up the ladder, Master Bards. Take the candle. Put the candle on the floor at the head of the bed where it cannot fall. Do not blow it out unless it gutters of itself. Sleep if you can. Do not come down." We climbed the ladder. The loft was warm with the rising heat of the room and the fire below. We took our boots off, and we lay down on the straw mattresses, and Cuthbert placed the candle as she had said, and we pulled the blankets over us. The loft had a low railing along its open edge of turned wood, and through the railing I could see down into the room below. The woman had gone back to her spinning. I will tell you, friend, what I saw and what I heard, and you must understand that I am telling you only what I saw and what I heard. I did not see everything. The candle was at the head of the bed, behind me where I lay, and the room below was lit only by the fire, and by her own candle on the kist beside her chair, and the angle of the loft railing did not show me the whole room. I saw the woman in her chair. I saw the fire on the hearth. I saw a strip of the deal table and the door of the cottage at the far end of the room. What I heard, I heard. For perhaps an hour after the first owl, nothing happened. The woman spun. The wheel made its low sound. The fire shifted. I half slept, the way a young man half sleeps in a strange place when he has been told to stay where he is. Then there was a knock at the door. It was not a loud knock. It was 3 knocks, slow, of a knuckle on wood. The kind of knock a neighbor gives when he has come to borrow a pat of butter and does not want to disturb the children. The woman did not get up. She did not stop spinning. A voice from outside the door said, "Mary, it is John. Mary, open the door." I did not then know if her name was Mary. I do not know it now. The voice was a man's voice, country accent, the voice of a man perhaps 30 years old, the voice of a man who knew the woman well and was tired and was cold. It was not an unpleasant voice. It was the voice of someone you would have opened a door to. The woman did not stop spinning. She did not look at the door. The voice said, "Mary, it is cold out here. Let me in, love." The wheel turned. The fire shifted. Cuthbert beside me had gone very still. I had gone very still too, friend, because there was a thing in the voice that I had not heard at first. a thing that was wrong, the way a note on a harp can be a quarter tone off and still be the right note in the most ways, but the wrong note in the one way that matters. The voice was the voice of a man who knew the woman well, and the voice was also not the voice of a man at all. I cannot put it more plainly. The voice was kind, and the voice was wrong both at the same time. The voice spoke at the door for perhaps a quarter of an hour. It said many things. It used the woman's name, if her name was Mary, many times. It said it was cold. It said it had walked far. It said it had bread for her in its bag if she would only open the door. It said the lark was old, and it could break it if it had to, but it would rather not, because it loved her. It said other things I will not tell you because they were the kinds of things a husband says to a wife when he wants her to forgive him for a thing he has done, and they were not for me, and they are not for you, and the woman did not listen. She spun. She spun the whole time, friend. The wheel made its low sound, and the woman who might have been Mary kept her hands on the wool and did not look up and did not answer. After the quarter of an hour, the voice went quiet. Then it spoke once more, and it spoke in a different way. It said, almost in a whisper, almost a sigh, "I am tired, Mary. I will come back in the morning." There was no sound of footsteps going away. The wood around the cottage was a wood that did not have footsteps, I think. The voice was at the door, and then the voice was not. The woman did not move for perhaps another quarter of an hour. Then she stood up, and she put a small log on the fire, and she sat down again, and she spun. "Forgive me, friend. I need a moment. Even now this part is not easy to tell. Are you still with me? Good. Drink. Pull the blanket close. The fire is good. I will go on. There were 2 more visitors that night. The second came perhaps an hour after the first had gone. It did not knock. It scratched at the door low down, the way a dog scratches when it wants to be let in. It did not speak. It scratched for a long time. It was patient. It scratched at the door, and then at the bottom of the door, and then up the door, and then it walked round the cottage. I heard it walk round. I heard it scratch at the back wall. I heard it scratch at the side wall near the goat. I heard the goat. The goat made a sound I have not heard a goat make before or since, friend. The goat made the sound of a thing that has seen a thing it cannot bear to see, and then the goat fell silent, and I do not know if it died, or if it only stopped, and I did not look. The thing scratched a little longer at the side wall, and then it went round to the front again, and it scratched at the door, and it scratched for perhaps half an hour more, and then it stopped, and there was no sound of footsteps going away from this one either, only an absence where the scratching had been. The woman had not stopped spinning the whole time. The third came almost at the end of the night. The candle on the kist had burned low, and the candle at the head of our bed had burned lower. And Cuthbert beside me had not moved, and I had not moved, and I had wet myself, friend. I will tell you the truth. I was 17 years old, and I had wet myself an hour before in the silence after the scratching. And Cuthbert had felt it through the straw, and had put his hand on my shoulder once and squeezed and said nothing. And I had loved him for that, and I love him for it still. The third visitor did not knock, and it did not scratch. It came up to the door, and it stood there. I knew it was there because the fire below dimmed. The fire did not go out. The fire simply gave less light, as though something had stepped between the fire and where I was looking, though nothing had stepped into the room and the door was shut. The fire gave less light, and the wheel of the spinning slowed, and then the wheel stopped, and the woman, for the first time that night, looked up. She looked at the door. She said, in a voice that was not the voice she had used to feed us our supper, a voice that was older than that voice and harder than that voice, and that came from somewhere deeper in her, she said, "Not tonight." That was all she said. 2 words. She said them quietly. She said them firmly. She did not stand up. She did not lift a hand. She said the 2 words, and then she put her hands back on the wool, and the wheel began to turn again, and the fire below brightened, and the thing at the door, whatever it was not at the door anymore. I do not know how long after that I slept. I think I slept some. I think I did not sleep all of the rest of the night. I lay in the dark of the loft with my heart beating hard, and I listened to the wheel below, and at some point I heard, from far off, the second owl. It was not the same kind of owl as the first. The first had been a barn owl. The second was a tawny owl, a long hooting call with a quaver at the end, the kind of call that hangs in the wood for a long moment after it is made. The wheel below stopped. The woman said, "It is the second owl. You may come down now." We came down. The cottage was as it had been. The fire was burning. The candle on the kist was a stub. The deal table had been set for 3 with a part of porridge in the middle and 3 bowls and a small jug of milk and a small dish of honey. The woman was sitting in a chair by the wheel, but she had stopped spinning. She looked tired. She looked, for the first time since we had met her, like a woman who was 40. She looked like a woman who had been 40 for a long time. She said, "Eat your porridge, then go." We ate the porridge. It was good porridge, friend. I have not had better. We ate it in silence. When we had finished, Cuthbert stood up and bowed to her properly, the bow he gave to a lord at the end of a feast, and he said, "Thank you for the shelter, mistress. Thank you for the supper. Thank you for the porridge. Thank you for the keeping of the hour." She said, "You will not come back this way." He said, "We will not." She said, "Tell no one of this house, not by name, not by direction. There are still some who would come looking if they heard of it, and there is enough comes looking already." He said, "We will tell no one of this house." She said, "Go safely to your hire at Aldric. The way out of the wood is straight east from my door. Keep the sun on your right shoulder in the morning. You will be at the edge of the wood by noon. From there the road is plain." He said, "Thank you." She said to me then, and only then, "Lad." I looked at her. Her grey eyes were on me. They were tired, but they were kind in a sad way, and she said, "You will tell of this. Not while I am alive. After, you will tell of it when you are old. You will sit at a fire, and you will tell it to one man at a time, the way you have heard it from me tonight, because the keeping of the hour will not always be done by women like me, and the people of the country must remember it, or they will open the door one night and not know they have done it. Tell of it, do you hear me?" I said, "I hear you." She said, "Good, go now. Eat the bread I have put in your master's pack on the way." We went. We walked out of her clearing east, as she had said, with the sun coming up on our right shoulders through the trees, and we did not look back, and we walked until noon. And we came out of Holt Murrow at the edge of a pasture that ran down to a stone road. And we took the stone road north and east toward Aldric. And we played at the hire there in the first week of November, and we were paid in silver. And we walked south again in the new year. Cuthbert did not speak of the cottage on the walk out. He did not speak much at all. He walked ahead of me with his shoulders set the way he set them when he had a thing to think about, and I followed and did not press him. At the edge of the pasture, when we had come out of the wood, he stopped and looked back into it once. Only once. He stood for a moment looking back at the dark of Holt Murrow behind us, and his face was not a face I had often seen on him. It was the face of a man who has just walked out of a thing he is not certain he should have walked into, and is not certain he has walked all the way out of. Then he turned, and we went on. We slept that night in a barn at a farm on the edge of a village called Tinwell, and the farmer's wife gave us a hot supper for the price of a song. And we ate, and we sang her a song Cuthbert knew about a girl on a hill, and the farmer's wife thanked us and took us to the barn and gave us extra blankets because the wind had turned. And that night, in the straw of the barn, Cuthbert said to me at last in the dark, "Lad." I said, "Yes, master." He said, "We will not speak of last night to anyone, not at Aldric, not at any hire, not at a fire, not even to one another after this. Do you understand?" I said, "I understand." He said, "I do not know what I have brought you through. I am sorry for it. I would have taken the long road if I had known." I said, "I am glad I was with you." He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "There are things in the country, lad. I have known of them a long time. I have not before tonight slept in the same house as one of them. I think the woman in the cottage was on the side of the people. I think the things that came to her door were not. I think she did the work she did because someone had to do it, and because she had been chosen for it, or because she had chosen it, I do not know which. I will tell you one more thing and then we will go to sleep. She gave us shelter when she did not have to. She gave us supper when she did not have to. She gave us the porridge in the morning when she did not have to. Remember that. The keepers of the country, when they show kindness to a stranger, do not show it cheaply. It costs them. We have taken a thing from her tonight, lad, and one day, perhaps in 50 years, perhaps in 60, the country will want it back from you. Be ready for it. Pay it when it is asked. Do you understand? I said, I understand. He said, sleep now, lad. I slept. I did not dream of the cottage that night, nor for many nights after, though I have dreamed of it often in the 64 years since, especially in autumn, when the leaves begin to come down and the wood I am walking past has a certain quality of dark in its trunks. I have come, in my old age, to be at peace with the dreams. The dreams are part of what she gave me. The dreams keep her alive in me, I think. The dreams are how I have remembered to tell of it now that I am old. We came to Aldric on the day appointed. The Lord, there was a good Lord, and the hire went well. We played for him for 2 weeks at the high table, and we were paid in silver, and he asked us to come again the next year, and Cuthbert said we would if we could, but did not promise it, because Cuthbert did not believe in promising more than a season in advance. Cuthbert did not speak of the cottage again. He did not speak of it for the rest of his life. I never asked him to. I think he was waiting, the way she had waited, for me to be old enough to tell of it, and then to die before I did, so that he would not be the one to break the keeping. He died when I was 31, friend, and the woman in the cottage I do not know when she died, but I have been telling of it since I was 70 years old, and I am 81 this winter, and I have told it now to 9 men in 11 years, and you are the 9th, and I think I will not tell it again. I am tired, friend. I would like to sleep when I am done. I will tell you, before I sleep, what I think the woman in the cottage was. I think she was a keeper. I think there are keepers in the country, friend, in odd places, in old clearings, in the lee of certain hills, by certain stretches of river, in certain small islands you reach by a causeway at low tide, who hold a thing closed for the rest of us. I do not think she was alone. I think there have been such keepers as long as there have been people in this country, and I think there were such keepers in the country before our people came to it, and I think the keepers learn the duty from one another and pass it on. I think the things that came to her door that night were old things, the kind of things that the country had on it before there were any houses at all, the things in the dark of the woods, the things that wear voices that are nearly the voices of people you know, the things that scratch at doors all night and never tire, the things you cannot name. They came to her clearing because her clearing was a place where the country thinned. The way I told you the moor at by Kirstone is a place where the country thins, and the keepers live in such places, and they keep the door shut between the first owl and the second owl, which is the hour when those things may come. And that is all the people of the country are owed, and that is all the keepers are owed in return, which is not much, friend. They have a goat and a wheel and a cottage in a wood, and they do their work, and no one knows their names. I have thought too over the years about why she let us in. She did not have to. She could have closed her door to us, as she closed it to what came after. I think she was lonely. I think a keeper who is alone for a long time grows to want company on the nights when the company is hardest to bear, the way a sailor wants a man beside him on the watch, even if the man cannot help him with the work. I think she was glad we were there. I think the keeping of the hour was easier with 2 strangers asleep above her in the loft. I think she was, in some way, comforted. I have wished sometimes that I had been brave enough to say something to her in the morning over the porridge. I was not. I was 17 and I was wet through with my own shame, and I could not look at her. I think she understood. Her eyes when she spoke to me at the end, friend, were the eyes of a woman who understood a great deal. She is dead now, surely. 64 years is a long time. She would have been 104. She is not living, and the cottage in Holt Murrow is not standing, I think, or it is standing, and someone else has taken it up, because the keepers find one another. They must. The country would have ended otherwise. There would have been a night somewhere when the door opened, and no one said not tonight, and the country would be a different country than it is, and we would not be sitting at this fire. That is the story, friend. That is the thing that happened to me when I was 17 years old in a wood called Holt Murrow on the high ground between the Eden Valley and the head of the Tees. I have given it to you now. You will not need to do anything with it tonight. You will sleep, and you will go on tomorrow wherever you are going. But one day, perhaps, in a hard wood on a cold night, you will hear a knock at a door, or you will hear a voice that is nearly a voice you know, or you will hear a scratching low down at the wood of a door where you are sheltering, and you will remember what I have told you, and you will not open the door. You will wait, friend. You will wait until the second owl. And in the morning, whatever has been at the door will be gone, and you will go on, and you will be alive, and you will know what to do for the next traveler you meet who is in need of the story. Pass it on. That is all. Pass it on when you find your listener. Find a man with the right kind of quiet in him, sit him at your fire, give him a cup of small beer, and tell him of the hour between the owls. Drink the rest of your cup. Lay your blanket flat. The fire will keep through the night, I will see to that. Sleep well. I will not be here when you wake. I will have gone south at first light, because I am old, and the south is kinder to old bones in November, and we will not meet again, you and I. But you have my story now, and that is a thing. Sleep well, friend. The fire is good. The wood is quiet. There is no owl tonight, and no door, and no voice at the door, and you and I are safe here together for one more night, and that is all anyone in the country is ever owed, and it is enough.